a little bit of brief commentary to kind of transition into those questions or comments that we might have. I think the overarching issue that we heard today was the need for funds, the need for more money and more funding, and I certainly understand that. And if I were in your shoes, I'm sure I would be up here making the same request. The other prevailing message that I sensed was that most of you do understand the need, the dire need for pension reform. When we talk about reform, we talk about change. And when we talk about change, people, as you know, society, it's a human instinct to resist change. But without change, we can't make reform. And if we don't have reform, we continue to kick the can down the road yet again. The reform that many of us have been wrestling with over the last 6 months or so has met opposition from many of you as a individual entities and collectively. And we understand the pushback, and we've tried to hear your appeals, defer to your suggestions as best we can. But in order for us to be able to identify some of the funding that you folks so desperately need, without pension reform, we can't identify those additional funds. We are severely challenged here in Frankfort to fund not only those things that we're currently funding, but much less these additional needs that you folks have identified. So that, in essence, is why we desperately do need to address pension reform. Now, some would suggest that in this effort to fund pensions and fund some of your needs, we simply need to do tax reform. But, I would suggest to you that tax reform, without really identifying what the problems are, is a foolhardy effort. And tax reform is long-term. Tax reform is not short-term. So in order for us to be able to address these critical budgetary needs that we're going to have in the 2018 session, we have to get pension reform done. We can do all the tax reform we want to do, but guess what? That's not going to put any money in our pockets immediately. And you folks have immediate needs. So I only wanted to add that as a commentary and take the privilege of this position as chairman to give that message. And at this time, I'll open the floor up for any questions or comments. Representative Riggs.
Mr. Chairman, mine is directed to the County Clerks Association. So if they want to come forward. I know everybody's here asking us to do this and that, look out for this and that, but I'm kind of turning the tables a little bit on you because I think we need help with something, and it falls in your all's bailiwick, and that is the act of voting in Kentucky. Voting is a bedrock of democracy, and we haven't really had many changes in modern times considering technology and people's schedules to improve our voting turnout. Our voting times, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., were determined a long time ago when we were an agrarian state. And I wondered if you guys would put together a task force. I don't know that you have one. I haven't seen any work on it. How to improve voting in Kentucky with it being a bedrock. I mean, absentee voting is cumbersome. Early voting is almost non-existent. It's just very difficult to vote one day in a 12-hour window. And I think we can improve the bedrock of democracy, but we have to have some input from you guys, because if we propose something that you all don't like, then you try to come and kill it. It doesn't work that way. We got to have your input and your ideas. I mean, in many other states, there's lots of alternatives. Some states stay open until 8 p.m. What's that going to entail? Some states make it simpler to vote in advance. Many of us travel now, and we're not there on Tuesday for those 12 hours. And those kind of, so we just need some more modernization, I think, in improving voter turnout. And maybe Other states have already done this, and we're way behind on this. So that's what I'm going to ask, is that the County Clerks Association leadership maybe put together a task force and give us some recommendations on what we can do to improve voter turnout, make it more accessible, make it more modern. Could you all work on that as a group?
Be very happy to. Yes.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Representative Riggs. At this time, the chair will recognize Senator McDaniel for a question or comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine's for the Judges Executive Association.
We have Mr. Lang here, their executive director. I believe Judge Turner had to return to his meeting.
Gotcha. Very well. Well, first of all, Mr. Chairman, I'd be remiss if I didn't note your first two people testifying were from Kenton County, and they did a very good job of setting the precedent to keep that thing moving. So thank you for Kenton County continuing to drive the Commonwealth. Secondly, I would like to make note that we would look forward to you guys as the judges welcoming Sheriff Dills to your ranks next year. We very much look forward to that happening. So that being said, Judge, I got a question as it relates. So one of the item, number one item was separate CERS from KRS. And as you know, along with Senator Bowen, I was the primary co-sponsor of that last year. But one of the big hang-ups is the actual definition of 78-852, where it says an inviolable contract of the Commonwealth, not necessarily with. Now, one of the things that you guys mentioned that's not on your written literature is supporting the inviolable contract while at the same time separating CERS. So my question to you guys is, do you support separating CERS and clarifying that 78-852 applies to the employer, not leaving the question as to whether or not it right now applies to the Commonwealth or the employer?
That's a good question, and I think everybody's looked into the inviolable contract and what does it mean. And I think there's been a great debate. You've had legal authorities to give different opinions on the inviolable contract. I've always thought it was the responsibility of the counties, and that's why I think we think it's a separation is a good idea. I don't think putting anything back on the Commonwealth. We fund our pension plan. Every city and county put money into it. They've never failed to
Put all your money into it.
Yes, we put quite a bit in there. So I think it is our responsibility, but I don't know exactly, Senator McDaniel, how that statute relates and how it could be interpreted, but I think it should be our responsibility, not the Commonwealth's.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to clarify, because that is something that, if that's pursued in the future, certainly all assets and all liabilities, to include the inviolable contract, would have to continue with the respective employers, would be my position.
And I think most of our discussions among ourselves have said the same.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vince, and thank you, Senator McDaniel, because that indeed is the essence of separation. So I appreciate you bringing that question forward. Chair, at this time, will recognize Representative Fleming for a question or comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Nixon, thank you very much for serving Jefferson County. It's an honor, too, for have you to serve Jefferson County, and thanks for a great job that you do.
Thank you.
My question pertains to really, I guess, the whole group. I think the chairman articulated our challenges in terms of the pension. That's going to be our focus. But the underlying current that we need to address is tax reform, too. And so we've got to be multitask and handle these things and juggle as many balls as we can, but also being very prudent in what we do. I wanted to ask if you, KACo, or all the other groups can get together in a very succinct manner in terms of what y'all want to do in terms of tax reform. I've been hearing general statements and general comments, and I even know KLC has made some comments about restaurant tax and so forth. But we need to have a little more meat on the bone. And I'd like for you all and your other associations to come up maybe by the 1st of January to get in particular exactly what y'all want to do about tax reform. Because we can go through and just come up with all types of situations, but if it's not coming from you all or what y'all see, then it's not going to go very far. So my question is, what in particular does KACo and the other associations that presented here are looking at in terms of tax reform? And I'd like for it to be detailed and specific as possible.
Well, Thank you very much for that question, and you must have overheard a conversation I had on Monday here in the governor's office. I intend, as early as tomorrow, we have our first executive board meeting with our new executive board at KACo, and to name the incoming president and the second vice president. We are going to get some specifics. We were asked to do so Monday, and I intend to have a full board meeting on December 19th. So assuming what may transpire between now and December 31, we do hope to be in a position to offer that. And we do recognize the chairman's and appreciate his comments, and we are fully supportive of not kicking the can down the road. We've been received very well here. You have listened, you have heard us, and we are cautiously optimistic on what maybe a next bill draft may look like in the coming days. And we're committed to also to address and I cannot speak for the individual associations, but they will be and are represented both on the executive board as well as the full board of directors. And we know, and that was in my comments, the importance to please give us an opportunity to have a seat at that table as we discuss tax reform, modernization of taxes. We certainly would welcome that opportunity.
Well, thank you, Mr. Nicholson. I appreciate your initiative to get together in terms of trying to peel back the onion, as you might say, in terms of what the details are. And just in the interest of times, for all those who presented today, I really strongly encourage you all to present in detail what y'all like to see and what your thoughts are in terms of tax reform. You know, and give it to the appropriate person. If you want to give it to the chair of A&R, Chairman Rudy, or myself, that's great. Or, you know, give it to the chair here, Chairman Bowman, and in terms of what those things are y'all looking at. So I encourage y'all to do it, and thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. The last question for this segment will be from Representative Miller. Now, if any of the members have a question that we didn't get to, or think of a question, if you'll just write that question down, try to get it to Mark. He'll get it to the proper presenters today, and we'll get you an answer to it. But at this time, we're going to wrap this segment of the agenda up with a question or comment from Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to direct this at the jailers. Is the jailer still here? Good. While he's walking up here, and I know in the material and your presentation, you said what you'd like is a higher per diem. If you could only have one, would you rather have the state take their prisoners and move them out of your jails as soon as possible, or would you rather have a premium or an increase in your per diem? And he's not here, so I can't speak for him, but I think in Jefferson County, they want them out. They want them gone. But for your organization, would you say that is this preferable, or is the per diem increase preferable?
Yes, sir. When the County Jailers or Kentucky Jailers Association basically entered into the partnership with the state several years ago for the state inmates, lower level non-violent inmates to be housed at the county jails, I think that was a excellent relationship for both parties. If you look at the information, the data that is released by the Department of Corrections, if you look at what it costs for the state to incarcerate an inmate in a state institution, the lower level institutions is around $53, $54 a day. The higher end institutions is up in the 90s dollars per day per inmate. So for us at $31.41 per day to housing a state inmate, by far is the state's best bang for the buck, if you will. So the housing of the state inmates is not necessarily the overall issue. The overall issue is, to my knowledge, every inmate in every county jail is in there for violating a state law, whether it's a misdemeanor or whether it's a felony. And so because of that, that alone, there has been legislation over the past few years that have reduced certain felonies to misdemeanors. And it's my understanding that that's possibly going to take place again in this next session. I understand that, but that's again shifting the burden from these felons that are, maybe going to stay out of the state prisons back down to the county level because it's reducing it to a misdemeanor. So overall, as far as me, and I feel like I'm speaking for everyone in the association, perhaps with the exception of Director Bolton in Louisville, I don't know that it's necessarily removing the state inmates as much as it would be the per diem increase.
And I know there is, in Jefferson County particularly, I think there's some of those low-level inmates they don't qualify to go in the halfway houses. They have to stay in the county jail.
Correct, sir.
Which I'm not sure if that makes sense, but you might propose something if you think there's a better way.
The Jailers Association, with your all's blessing last year, was that we're able to, through the CJPAC and Senate Bill 120, the reentry program, reentry component, we're in the process. That language passed, and once we get the, I guess basically, if you will, the policies and procedures and exactly how that's going to play out, what inmates are going to be allowed to come back to the county jails, we're looking at basically the full gamut, because at some point, even if you have a violent offender that's serving on a Class B felony for armed robbery or something, once they serve their time, if they've served their 10 years, their 15 years, their 18 years, they're simply open the door and they're released, and they go back to a local community that they came out of more often than not. So irregardless of their classification level, we believe that at some point it would be in society's best interest for them to come back to a local level and be reintegrated back into society. And so that's certainly a component that we're looking at as well.
All right. Thank you, sir, very
Yes,
much.
sir.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you all very much. David, we appreciate you orchestrating things for us today. Good luck on all of your endeavors, and congratulations on your new position. We look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, each of you.
So, moving along, we're going to get into the next part of our agenda.